What is going on, everybody? It's me, Severin7, and today I'm bringing you the 5 deck lists I'm most excited to try on the release day of Tarkir. It releases on MTG Arena on April 8th, so I'll be doing a special live stream that day to go over all these deck lists and play them for you and have a good time. So I hope you'll join me on that day. But for now, I'm going to go over these lists with you a little bit early on Moxfield. And I hope that if you like these lists and you think they're cool, you'll give me a quick like and a follow over on Moxfield. I'm trying to grow my presence over there, and I would be greatly appreciated. And if you'd like to discuss these decks with me more personally, my link to my Discord is in the description as well. So if you'd like to join that, you can speak to me more directly. You can share your own ideas and deck lists with me. Talk to me about cards you're excited about. I would love to hear from you. So with that, I'm really excited about Tarkir. So let's get into these deck lists. Right, so first up we have 5 color control. This is probably the jankiest deck that I have on this list of 5, but boy is it fun. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So what are we doing? We are kind of sort of playing Domain, but switching it up from Overlords to more of a control crazy, play all the cool big things from Tarkir deck. But I think the deck actually has some real legs. So we're ramping with things like Astral Cornucopia and Overlord of the Hauntwoods, and then we are taking advantage of things like Up the Beanstalk, Leyline Binding, Sunfall, Split Ups, things like that to keep ourselves from dying. We've also got 2 copies of Dragonback Assault, which is a 6-mana enchantment that says when it enters, it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, and then it has landfall that we get to create a 4/4. So in a deck where we have overlords that once they come off impending can attack and make lands, and we can do things like that late in the game, even if we're not drawing lands, just to make 4/4s all the time is pretty sweet. Some other really cool cards from this set that I really like New Way Forward. So this is a 5-mana Jeskai enchantment that instant. It says the next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage, and when damage is prevented this way, New Way Forward deals that much damage to that source's controller, and you may draw that many cards. I know it's 5 mana, but it feels really good sometimes to be able to just take an opponent's really big attack, like maybe they pump their mouse up to like 1,000,000 attack or something, or they try to fling it at you with Callous Sellsword, and then New Way Forward stops that from happening, and then draws you a bunch of cards and pings your opponent, which is pretty sweet. So I just think it's an interesting card to try a couple of copies of in the list. And then I love Jeskai Revelation. I feel like this is a card that if you resolve it, it's just so hard to come back from for the opponent. It's 7 mana instant, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand, so you can either counter something or bounce something that's already on the battlefield. Then Jeskai Revolution deals 4 damage to any target. We get 2 1/1 white monks with prowess. We draw 2 cards and gain 4 life. It does all the things. For 7 mana, that is at an instant speed, that is a lot of value. So I think that this card has some serious potential in Standard, to be honest. If you can ramp up to this and cast this reliably, it's really sweet. And then we've also got, like, with all these 3-color spells in the deck, you know, Ancient Cornucopia becomes very, very strong. And we can play multiple copies of this and be gaining tons and tons of life. We've also got a single copy of Death Begets Life because in the Domain Control Mirror match, this card just absolutely destroys Domain. And yes, maybe we lose some bindings or some Up the Beanstalks or something like that, but in a lot of cases our opponent will probably have bindinged our bindings anyway, or something of that sort, and we will end up probably getting some stuff back. But we draw a ton of cards off this, so even if we do lose a few things, it tends to be pretty good in my opinion. And then obviously we've got the board wipes to try to keep things in check in the early game and make sure that we're not losing to go wide strategies. And then 2 copies of Areni the Song Unending, because I think this is just another fantastic thing to ramp up into. Being able to play this, it's got pro white and pro black, so it's got protection from the 2 best removal colors in the format that can deal with it. And then it basically wipes the opponent's board. So we have so many ways to just completely disrupt our opponent's board in the late game. We've got lots of life gain mechanics to catch up with, things like Ancient Cornucopia, gaining us life and stuff like that. And I just think this deck is really fun. I don't know if it's going to be good, but I'm going to play it and I'm going to try to put it through 40 games and see if we can get a solid win rate out of it. But Is it Domain Overlords? No, it's not as good as Domain Overlords. But if you want to play a bunch of cool new cards from the new set, this is a really sweet place to start. It's not cheap though. It is a lot of mythics from the new set. I basically just jammed a whole bunch of the awesome mythics from the new set. So keep that in mind. It is going to be a lot of wild cards. But if you've got a bunch laying around or you're planning on opening a whole bunch of packs, then this will be a fun deck to try out on the first day, I think. So let us move on to the next deck. My second deck on the list is an Abzan Midrange list. So this is probably the deck I'm most excited about. I'm going to scroll down a little bit, but just to point out, we do have a single copy of Elspeth Stormslayer in this list. But we are a pretty low to the ground Abzan list, playing things like Novice Inspectors and Paw Patch Recruits in the 1-drop slot, and in the 2-drop slot, we've got Voice of Victory, which I just think is an absolute all-star from this set. The 2-mana 1/3 that says our opponents can't cast spells during our turn. We love that. And then it has Mobilize too, so it makes 2 1/1s every time it attacks that get sacrificed at the end of turn. But that plays really well with Fellothar, Dawn of the Abzan, because you can stack these triggers so that Voice of Victory's Mobilize resolves first, and then you sacrifice one of those tokens to Fellothar when she either enters or when she attacks, and it pumps up the whole rest of the team. So if we've already got a 1-drop or something on the battlefield, and then we play Voice of Victory, and then we play Fellothar, we attack with Voice of Victory, play Fellothar, grow our team. The following turn when we attack with everything, we sacrifice one of the tokens, the other token grows into a 2/2 anyway, even though it's going to get sacrificed, so it's still, you're not losing any power. And then the same thing goes with Sinkhole Surveyor, because it kind of does the same thing. Whenever this creature attacks, it's a 1/3 with flyer, and we lose a life and it endures 1, so it makes a 1/1 spirit, or we can put a counter on it. Both very solid abilities, both play very well with Fellothar, so it's a really nice curve. We also have Novice Inspector, which creates a clue that we can sacrifice to Fellothar. So we've got a pretty solid build up to making sure that once we cast Fellothar, we have something to sacrifice that doesn't hurt us. We've also got 2 Grim Baubles in the 1-drop slot as well to help with that aggressive creatures, and then sacrifice it later to Fellothar. So we've also got 4 copies of Skirmish Rhino, because you're going to get sick of it, but I love Rhino. I love Siege Rhino, and Skirmish Rhino is the same card for 1 less mana, 1 less power and toughness, and 1 less life gain loss. So I love this card, and I will slam it into anything that can run it. Single copy of Sirach, Elusive Hunter, because this makes anything that our opponent targets draw us a card, and this counts spells that they counter too. So if they counter something, we get to draw a card from that as well. And then pair that up with Paw Patch Recruit, and we're putting counters on stuff whenever our opponent kills things, and it's quite nice. And then in the 4-drop slot, we've got 3 copies of Yathan Road Watcher, because this buys back all of our cool stuff. So, you know, our opponent removes things, we get to draw cards, we get to put some counters on things, and then we buy it back with Yathan Road Watcher, and I think that's really sweet. In the sorceries, we've got a single copy of Maelstrom Pulse to deal with the other token strategies that might have a whole bunch of the same kinds of tokens, or Abzan or Mardu Mobilize decks. 3 copies of Bitter Triumph, just to make sure that we can deal with creatures and planeswalkers, and discarding things is not always bad, since we do have Yathan Road Watcher to recur some things. Coordinated Maneuver, because we do make a lot of creatures pretty easily, so we can either get rid of something based on the amount of creatures we have, or we can destroy an enchantment, so it's a little bit versatile. And then a single copy of Revival of the Ancestors, because I like this card a lot. It makes 3 tokens when it comes in, so it's, you know, it's not terrible value. And then if it survives, we get to put counters on a bunch of stuff, and then everything gets trample and lifelink on the 3rd chapter, and I think that's pretty sweet. And then obviously an Abzan mana base. And that is my second brew, Abzan Midrange. Let's move on to number 3. At number 3, we have Jeskai Tokens. Now, this is an interesting one, and I won't lie to you, this doesn't have to be Jeskai. You could absolutely play this red-white, like the typical red-white tokens list would be, but I really like the idea of Shiko, Paragon of the Way, combined with Elspeth Stormslayer, getting back Caretaker's Talents or Urabrask's Forge, and then getting bonus copies of them, because Shiko, Paragon of the Way, is a 5-mana 4/5 with Vigilance. Sorry, my fluffball's joining me today. 4/5 flying Vigilance. When he enters, exile target non-land card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard, copy it, and then you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. But it comes in as a copy, a token. So Elspeth Stormslayer, if she's on the battlefield when you cast Shiko and you get something back from your graveyard, like a Siege or a 3 Blind Mice or a Caretaker's Talent or a Carrot Cake or an Urbrask Sword or whatever, you get twice the tokens if you have Elspeth on the battlefield. So that's pretty awesome. And I just think that it's a really sweet card, so I wanted to try it out. So since we're playing blue, I've added a single copy of Ral Quackling Wit because it's something that creates tokens when we play it, so it pairs very nicely with Caretaker's Talent. We've also got a couple copies of Ill-Timed Explosion to help wipe the board to go along with our Sunfalls. Torch the Towers because they're very strong against, you know, early aggression, and being able to sack our tokens when we need to torch things is very good. And then I included a single copy of 3 Blind Mice on the off chance that we do get to do something with Shiko. 3 Blind Mice can potentially start making copies of very strong things on the battlefield, you know, like just copies of Urbrask, and then Caretaker's Talent, second ability, can start making copies of the copies and just going nuts. So I added a single copy of 3 Blind Mice just so that every once in a while we have one of those crazy games where we just make a ton of copies of cool stuff. And then Windcrag Siege is pretty nice because it makes it so that we get a token every turn, and I really like that a lot. So that is Jeskai Tokens. Let's move on to number 4. At number 4 on the list, I have Sultai Occulus. This is an interesting list that takes advantage of a kind of a strategy I was working on a little bit before Tarkir. Using no one left behind to reanimate Oculuses, but being able to use the 5 mana mode on this to also sometimes reanimate larger things like Atraxa, or if we need it, Fangkeeper's Familiars, or Prowlers, or Lotus Light Dancers. I have a couple of cool new cards from the new set in this list, namely Roxasha's Bargain, which is basically instant speed stock up for Sultai colored mana, but it also puts the stuff we don't take in our graveyard, so it helps us out a little bit. We've also got Awaken the Honored Dead, which is, I think it's a pretty sweet card. I've had some debate with people in the Discords and Facebook and things like that it's not that valuable, but I think for 3 mana being able to destroy a non-land permanent, and then the second 2 really benefit our deck by letting us mill and get things back from our graveyard, I think is pretty sweet. We are playing a single copy of Lotus Light Dancers because I think this is reasonable. If we're having a hard time getting something in the graveyard, because it's not like we're playing a critical mass of things to reanimate, right? This lets us go and fetch an Oculus, an Atraxa, a Prowler, you know, and get those in the graveyard, and then we can take advantage of all of those things. We can either use the single Prowler to put a bunch of counters on something equal to the number of lands that are in our graveyard, or we can go and fetch an Atraxa and use the 5 mana half of this to reanimate it, or an Oculus if that's what we need, and use this for 2 mana to reanimate it. So I think that Lotus Light Dancers is a neat inclusion as a single copy, just to tutor out the things we need to make sure that we have targets for our reanimation. And then I like Lesed Prowler just because it's a solid body for 4 mana. 4 mana 5/5, and then it has a really solid renew ability since we're milling a bunch of stuff anyway. Being able to put a bunch of counters on like a Picklock Prankster after we've used the adventure side of this and then recast it as a 1/3, it has Vigilance, and then we slap a whole bunch of counters on it with Lesed Prowler, I think is pretty awesome. And I think Fangkeeper's Familiar might be one of the best cards in the set, in my personal opinion. For 4 mana, you get a 3/3, and it just does so many things. Being able to gain 3 and surveil 3 can keep us alive and further our plan. Destroying an enchantment can help us against overlords. Countering a creature spell can help us against, you know, any creature deck, obviously. So I think that Fangkeeper's Familiar is really strong in this list. And then as far as removal goes, we've got some Bitter Triumphs and some cut downs. We're also playing 3 copies of Founding the Third Path and 3 copies of Dredger's Insight to help us get stuff out of our graveyard. Also, Dredger's Insight can help us with life gain. And that is Sultai Occulus. And I think this probably is the most competitive of the lists that I've shown so far. Maybe a close second behind Abzan. I think the Abzan list I made might actually be a little more consistent than this one, but this is really strong in my opinion. I think it's very fun, and I'm really excited to play this for you guys once Tarkir comes out. So let's move on to the final one. That's right, it's Temur Surprise. And what are we doing with Temur Surprise? Well, we've got some cool new cards from Tarkir to add to this list. We've still obviously got Terror of the Peaks and Smuggler Surprise, but now we are playing some Ureni the Song Unendings in this list, because being able to Smuggler Surprise this in and get this ETB at instant speed is incredible. Sometimes even being able to Smuggler Surprise two very strong creatures isn't enough. Sometimes the opponent has just gone too wide. Sometimes the opponent has too many blockers, or they're, you know, attacking us and they have just too much damage, and two creatures just isn't enough. I recently built and played for you guys like an Overlord Smuggler Surprise, and I had games where even putting Overlords onto the battlefield wasn't always enough. Oreni, I feel like even if you only have 5 or 6 mana, it's just so much value, especially if you have a terror to go with it, because you can, you know, hit them in the face for 10 and then wipe their board, or you can hit a big thing on their board for 10 and then use Oreni's ability to wipe away all the little stuff, get rid of planeswalkers, things like that. I think Oreni is really strong, and this is already a ramp list, and yeah, it's 8 mana, but it's not that hard to get to 8 mana, especially with things like Heaped Harvest helping us go and get lands. Overlord of the Hauntwoods helps us get lands. Glimpse the Cores help us get ramp through lands. The only non-land ramp we have is Llanowar Elf. So if we cast Oreni, we are most likely casting this with 7 or more lands on the battlefield. So we're going to get a nice ETB out of this. And then we've got 2 copies of Dragonback Assault in this list as well, because it's a solid board wipe, and that landfall is really good, especially with Overlords and all these different ramp spells that go and fetch lands out of our deck, and additional surprises that maybe we have left over that we can use to fetch lands using the mill and get lands and creatures ability. And then we've got a single copy of Bonnie Paw on the list because it goes well with Terror of the Peaks, because it makes a big giant token and can give us some extra damage. Single copy of Twin Flame Tyrant because occasionally if we already have a Twin Flame Tyrant on the field and then we Smuggler Surprise in Terror of the Peak and Oreni, then we just win on the spot. A single copy of Atali because Atali is still very strong, and having that 1 copy in there can sometimes just go off for us. And then we're playing the new Exhales from this because I think Dispelling Exhale and Molten Exhale are very strong. We do have, you know, 8 dragons in the list, so it's not crazy that we can actually behold a dragon with these. But even without the behold, being able to deal 4 damage to a creature or planeswalker is pretty sweet, and being able to counter something unless our opponent pays 2 is pretty nice. But I mean, it's not that hard for us to have dragons in our hand, so I'd say probably about 50% of the time with how much we have in the list, we would be able to behold a dragon. And so 50% of the time, these are going to be extremely powerful spells rather than just decent spells. So I've got the 3 copies of each of these in here, and I'm going to test those out, see how it feels. Maybe I end up replacing Atali and Bonnie Paw with a couple more dragons, just to increase the likelihood that we can have these. But for right now, I like having the single copy of Bonnie and Atali just for some additional potential as far as what we can do in the late game. And this list is probably the one I'm most excited about, just because it's so me. I just love ramping into big dumb stuff like Oreni and Atali and things like that. And I love the potential combo kill with Surprise. Smuggler Surprise is and has always been one of my favorite cards. And I think it's a really, really sweet card to keep playing with, especially with big, crazy things like Oreni, because Oreni's hard to remove too. You know, a lot of times we would surprise things in and then our opponent still has removal for it. Well, Oreni dodges all single target removal. So not all, but all the good single target removal. So anyway, these are my 5 brews that I'm going to be testing out first on day 1 of Arena. I will be playing these decks on stream the day Tarkir releases, and I'm really excited to share them with you. So let me know what you think. I will have all these deck lists links post in the description so you can look at them, edit them, make your own adjustments to them, things like that. See how you feel about it. I would love to know what you think about these lists. I want to know what cards you're most excited about from Tarkir, so please take a quick moment to leave a comment. If you want to see me play these on stream when Tarkir releases and you're not subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that we can have some fun together on release day and play all these awesome fun decks and then some, because by the time release comes around, I will have even more cool things brewed up. So thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed my 5 brews that I am most excited to play for Tarkir, and I will catch you on release day.